Good morning. So, definitely always making it happen on the show. I'm making it happen. And so, as I mentioned, we have guest Sonia Jacobs-Dowe. She's executive director for St. Croix Landmarks, Landmark Society. And we're going to talk about, culture. Of course, it's Black History Month, as I mentioned, and also VI History Month. And we are going to be talking about, certain things in regards to our own culture and why it's important to continue to have these conversations and not just take it for granted and it's just a month. But we should actually be having these conversations every day. And so, Sonia, are you on the line? I can't hear anything. Huh?
Good morning, caller.
Good morning.
Okay, great. I can hear you. Can you turn up the volume for my headset? Great. So good morning and welcome. I'm glad we were able to get you on. So how are you doing this morning? Hello?
Miss Jacobs?
Yes, I can barely hear Nykole.
Yeah, can you turn up my volume?
Hear her.
Yeah, but the volume's up.
Probably the volume. Or maybe try your volume on. You need to turn the volume up on the mic, maybe.
Everything is up.
Everything is up? Okay, Sonia, maybe turn up
The
your volume on your
my
phone.
phone is all the way up.
But can you hear?
No, she can't. She says she can't hear.
And I
Can
have
you
it
just
as
look at
high
the
as I can
levels
go.
for my volume? Because that's what somebody said the last time they had issues with hearing me last week. Okay, they said they're on the max, so I don't know. Maybe just have to strain your ear a bit. So can you hear me enough to?
I can just barely hear you.
Okay, well then we're gonna have to work with it. I can hardly hear her in my audios here too, in the headset.
Okay.
The headset is up. Tyrone, the headset for this one, number 2. Okay. Okay. Yeah, it's too loud. All right, so Sonia, we just have to move forward. It's almost half the time for the show. So, just wanted to talk about. Hopefully, you can hear me. If not, then I'll just have to do it solo, unfortunately. But we wanted to talk about the foundation of identity, and yeah, I'm getting notices from everybody saying my audio is low, but basically, our culture is the essence of who we are, and it's a reflection of our history. And I know you're very knowledgeable about our history, the values and traditions. And so I just wanted to get your perspective on, the importance of continuing having these conversations, especially in the home, and teaching our children. And that, it helps with the development and children's identity and form of belonging. So I just wanted to get your perspective on that and encourage your parents to have these conversations at home.
Yes. I'm hoping that your audience can hear me better than I'm able to hear you. Good morning, Nykole, and good morning to your listening audience. During Black History Month, there are a lot of opportunities for families to help their children and young people to feel a sense of self, to get to know more about their families, about their history, about their community. So and what this does for young people is it gives them firm standing. It gives them a sense of who they are. As old people used to say to me, who you belong to or who you thought, that sense beyond just themselves, that they're not just a single person in this world, but that they're connected to an entire network of family and friends and people in the community. So what I'd like to suggest to parents, because once children know who they are, when they graduate, when they're in high school and someone is trying to lead them astray, or even in elementary school at any level, and someone is trying to lead them astray, or there's a temptation, they can fall back on those values, on that sense of self that the family has installed in them. And so I want to encourage families to take every opportunity to do activities together. Sometimes it's not, and I apologize for my voice, I'm a little hoarse this morning, but it's not just about telling them what to do or giving them the rules or everything, but letting them understand. And sometimes these conversations do not come through a lecture. They might come while you're working on an activity that seems to be unrelated to the family values and everything else, but it's the conversations that begin in those spaces that can give you that opportunity to share and give your child an opportunity to ask questions. So first I say to parents, be ready to ask for questions. And if you're hit with one that catches you off guard, just let them know that you need a little time, and maybe tomorrow or later in the week, I'll be better able to answer that question. So you're not shutting down the question, but you're setting a time, and that gives you space to reflect on whatever you need to do. Sometimes it might be a personal question, or it might be something that you just didn't expect from your child. And so you just make room to answer it at a different time. But a lot of the questions that can come are very simple questions. So some of the activities that I wanted to suggest for them are to do things, and you can pick something that you can do. There's 6 weeks now between now and the end of March. So for the remainder of Black History Month, and remember for us, Black History Month is every month of the year, but also for VI History Month in March, introduce your child as he or she hasn't yet been introduced to a Nancy story. These are stories that come from various cultures on the African continent, and that tell a story, but it also teaches. There's a moral to the story. And so there's an opportunity to do some discussion after the story. Sometimes these stories are introduced in school. They're available online. There are books that have them as well. So there are lots of opportunities. So you can look up a story and you guys can read it together, and then you can ask questions, and your child will have some questions. But again, it's about different situations, how people act, what the result is, and what's the lesson that's learned from the story. The Nancy story is always a good starting point.
Okay,
the
great.
other thing,
Hi.
that
Can you hear me?
do, and you can look
She
for
can't hear me.
real life examples
Sonia.
that are similar to what's in that Nancy story. The other thing that you could do
She's not hearing me.
is to start doing a family tree with your child. We know a lot of fourth grade teachers ask children to do that. And children sometimes are lost. Sometimes I'm in the classroom with students and they know their grandmother as Granny or as Nana, but they don't really know their name. So even starting with that, giving them the name of your full name, their other parents' full name, and their grandparents' name, and starting to place that on the tree.
Hello? Can you hear Nykole?
No?
Can you hear Nykole?
I cannot.
Okay, go ahead. She's talking loud. Nykole's going to be
Can
talking.
you hear me now?
Now I can.
Okay, so my volume was down. All right. So great. I wanted to stop you so it's not a monologue. Thank you for those the tips on Anansi. I wanted to get into more details about what Anansi is, because I've always heard it, and for those who don't know the background of it, that's great. I also like the suggestion you mentioned about for the little children, how to start them off, because it is gradual with given information. But before we get into all of the ways of that parents can incorporate educating the children about culture, I still wanted to just re-emphasize or reiterate that the role that the parents play and the identity of our children, and just identity of ourselves, but the way that we continue the continuation of our culture is by teaching our children. And I found, I don't know if you feel it as well, I'm seeing that our culture doesn't just is in addition to our history, it's also about the way that we do things. And I wanted to iterate about just our cultural norms, because I mentioned it before on the show. And I am continuing to see it, like just a way of maybe our interactions with each other, like saying good morning, good afternoon. That's part of our culture. But in addition to like the Anansi stories and, those kind of things, I wanted to get your perspective and also emphasize, because usually I'm just on the radio when I do my shows by myself, talking about like, the importance of us continue our cultural, because I feel like we have a lot of people moving here that's from other places, and our culture is getting muddled. So what is your point on regards, or your thoughts on like our way of interacting and continuing the cultural norms that I knew growing up?
Well, and it's not, you're right that there are a lot of people move in here and bring in other norms, but also we have greater access to other cultures through the media, through the internet. We are being impacted not only by other people that we meet face to face, but by a lot of, and the biggest example, and I know it can be controversial, but one of the best examples is if you look at our Croix Christmas Festival and how it changed when I was growing up, from when I was growing up in the 60s or 70s, and what is passing now for a Croix Christmas Festival, it is so very different. It seems to some people that it's impossible to recapture the true culture that we would celebrate at Christmas. But I always say, as long as somebody is alive and practicing it, it's not too late. So on our norms and in our laws, you can't even wear a bathing suit on the street in the Virgin Islands. Now, that law isn't being enforced in terms of bathing suits, but we're wearing very, very much less than a bathing suit in most of our festival troops. So our norms were put into law, but they're not being enforced. And in terms of our festival troops, they're totally being ignored. So there was a norm about how you dressed in public and what was appropriate to be out in public. And that is one where we've taken many steps away from that norm. And when we have a parade with a troop, if I go to the parade with a young child, I'm then exposing them to the practice that has almost taken over our Christmas festival. And so even when I'm saying to a child, this is what's appropriate, or any parent is saying to their child, this is what's appropriate to wear or to do out in the street, they're also seeing what other people are doing. They see it directly in front of them if they go to a parade, but they also see it in all the videos. And, our children have access to the internet, they have access to public television, and all of these parades are recorded.
Right.
And then they're alive forever.
So I get it with the parades, and I'm not sure if we're going to have an influence on that, but I'm talking about like everyday interactions. And I'm not negating or minimizing that, but I don't want to harp on the parade because I know they've called in a lot about that. And
yeah. That's why I said I know it's controversial, right. But you see, it's our everyday 365 days. We can't teach one culture Monday to Friday and a different culture Saturday and Sunday. Or we can't teach one culture January to November and a different one in December and beginning of January.
I got it.
So it's our everyday. We teach our children to greet people when they meet them on the street, whether they know them or not, to say good morning, good afternoon, to say yes, ma'am, or yes, Miss So-and-so, or yes, cousin so-and-so, yes, auntie, or no,
but I'm seeing that's not happening now. Right, it's not happening.
When you sit at a table, the food that's there is for everyone. So you offer others, if there's one piece of bread left or two pieces of bread, you ask if anyone would like to split it. You don't just think of yourself and take it and use it yourself. So it's the greetings that we do. It's the manner in which we carry ourselves in public. Our parents are the first teachers.
Right.
Our parents are the very first teachers The school then re-emphasizes that and adds some more. For some people, the house of worship or the church community also re-emphasize culture. So you've got, and at one time the media also did. So in the smaller communities in which, Nykole, you and I grew up, you had all of those institutions and others working together to pass on the culture. And a stranger could see you on the street and correct you or suggest to you something different than what you might be doing or show you the correct way to do something. And many people have become uncomfortable with doing that, with walking up to a stranger or a child that they don't know and saying something. Even some teachers are hesitant because of interactions that they've had when they tried to correct a child. But part of our culture, too, is that we don't shy away from doing what's correct. It doesn't mean we have to raise our voice. It doesn't mean we have to embarrass anyone, but that we're teaching. We're constantly teaching. So I've taken some chances. Others might not be willing to. But if we step up for each other, we can make it easier to teach and preserve the culture.
Yeah, and I do agree.
And I'd like to give you an example. It might be too much for others, but this is what I've done. I've been in a large store that recently closed in Sunshine Mall and could see a child melting down and the parent running out of patience, right? And the child is down on the ground crying and the parent is already threatening them. If they don't get up, what's going to happen? I left my shopping cart and just walked up carefully and slow and quietly to the parent and just said, "Can I help you in any way? Would you like to take my space in the line? Or if your child would let me, would you mind if I held his or her hand and walk with you up to the line and I can start talking to them? Or vice versa. Can I take the things that you're carrying for you and you take the child?" Because the child is tired, and I've had occasions when my child was tired. I've left many carts in a store with an employee saying, "Sorry, but my child really is overtired and they need to go." And never once in the 2 or 3 times I've done that in a large store has a parent cursed me out or said no. They've always welcomed somebody trying to give them a helping hand. So we can't use our fear that a parent might react negatively to hold us back from practicing our culture and giving a helping hand when it's needed.
So you're saying that part of our culture is the village. It takes a village to raise a child.
Yes. When we were growing up, nobody asked if they could be a part of the village. They were the village. So if you were doing something good, they congratulated you. They praised you. If you were a little off course, they would correct you. And some people were more gentle than others, but they would correct you. And we accepted that was the role the village had in our lives. So there's small ways. If you're not comfortable interacting with a stranger, look around your own family. There's some parent that's running out of patience, or some child that just needs a little urging in the right direction. And so you don't have to go do it with a stranger out in public, but in small ways. And always be humble in your approach, because that is more easily accepted than if you yell at the person or raise your voice or make them feel ashamed.
And so I do agree. I do agree with that. So part of our culture, so we're talking about like the Anansi and those things, like those are specific things, but I feel like our culture is so many facets, like you said about dress, and then also about the way that we interact with the children, the norms of like how we greet each other, well, when I was growing up, how it was demanded how you greeted once you stepped into an establishment, a bus, it was expected and you could feel it. And now also you're saying that the importance of stepping in at times, not being afraid, and like as time has gone on, people have become reluctant to provide or to instill some some thoughts to somebody. They said it could, possibly assist or, step in and help. And so that we should not veer away from those things. We need to continue to do that because that's important for our culture, especially for being such a small place, not getting like jaded about being, helping or speaking up when you see something wrong, because there's a lot of people that we call in. Yeah, we make noise on the radio, but like, are you making noise within the community? Not making noise negatively, but like, really like stepping in and saying, hey, when I see a child on the road and it's during school, I'm like, why are you not in school? And I'll turn my car around and ask that. And and so like it takes a village. And so as we speaking about that, if you just tuning in, we have Sonia Jacobs-Dowe. She is the executive director of the St. Croix Landmarks, and she's very knowledgeable about our history and our culture. And I definitely wanted to have her on so we could discuss it, because I know I've talked about it, just one-on-one, well, just me, when I do my solos. But I really wanted to have the other perspective of somebody that's engaged in the community and definitely has seen our culture, progress in some ways. And want to just be a reminder for those who, are listening to be proactive, be still active. I was in an establishment yesterday and I said good morning. Was it this morning? I can't remember, so many things. But I was somewhere and I said good morning, and nobody responded. It was all older people. Not old people, but just, older, like, ish.
Older than you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and nobody responded. Last night. I was somewhere last night. Okay, it was last night. I walked, they just turned around and looked at me. Everybody local. So, wow. It was last night in a local establishment. Mm-hmm. So, right. It is just, and I wanted to say, hey, did you guys hear me? But I was like, look, I ain't feeling like it today. So, just a reminder. You might be able to, when nobody answers you, you might be able to follow up. But I hope everybody's having a good day. Yeah. Which is another way of saying, did you hear me? You see what I'm saying? Right. But now we have so much that distracts us that sometimes when we walk into a place, everybody's on their phone. And you can't always tell they're on their phone because they might be talking through an earbud. True. So they're not either really not hearing you, or they're distracted by the conversation they're having. So you're right. It happens not only in the youngest generation, but it happens in other generations as well. And people might think it's a small thing, but I believe it's such a big thing because, that's one of the reasons why I returned, First I thought it was annoying when I first returned from living in the States. But then I realized, that is great. That's interacting. If people want you to be social, we're a social place. It's not like when you're in the States and you pass people straight, don't say good morning. They'll think you're kind of weird depending on where you are in the States. But, here that was probably part of the reasons when I wanted to move back, because it's fun in the sun, but just also the interaction. So talking about, our culture every day, that was part of it. Okay. So I'm beating on it because I feel it's important that there's a foundation of us feeling happy, it's the interactions, it's the warmness that we give each other when we come into establishment, saying hello and whatnot. Okay, so moving along, because time is going to go on. So if you're tuning in, we're talking about the culture. This is Black History Month, and next month is VI History. And we're just talking about locally what we can do. Talking about it takes a village, and not being reluctant or hesitant when you see something to somebody that could impart some positivity, regardless of how they take it. Right? You're saying, Sonia, that step forward, give a hand, because sometimes they want it, like you saying in the line. You help somebody in the line, a child melting down. A parent probably wants to help, right? In some way. Yes. So, and the approach makes a difference in how they respond to you. Right. The approach will make a difference because nobody wants to be embarrassed. And very often parents are reacting because they're tired, but now the child might be creating a scene and they feel embarrassed by that as well. So it's as gentle as you can, and making it, about telling them, oh my goodness, how many times my child has just been so tired that they melted down on me. Let me help you. Please let me help you. Yeah. That's rarely going to be rejected. So
it's everything that we do every day. It's introducing children to food, even when we personally might not like that food, right? So rather than passing on our dislike of the food, and I'll take, for instance, let's say fungi, right? Let's say I don't like to eat fungi, but if I learn to make fungi, my children still get introduced to it, rather than just hearing me say that I don't like fungi. So in our and it might be on 3 different occasions, or it might be 3 bites in that meal. And so that your children are exposed to things, they know that this is something traditional, they know why we eat it, what we eat it with. Now, they may still choose later on that they don't want to eat that, and that's okay, but at least you've created the exposure. So learning to make our traditional dishes so that we can be the first teacher to introduce. Because if you rely on the school or something else, that person might not be a part of the culture in which they grew up, and they may not introduce it. They might introduce something else, which is good. There's nothing wrong with it. But if your teacher is more accustomed to dukana and sawfish, then that might be what they get introduced to if you don't do it at home. So you do it first at home. You do things like my mother used to make a tea with hibiscus flowers, which is a medicinal drink. But then she would put lime in it and sweeten it. And we drank it. We didn't know it was medicinal. It was bright red, just like Kool-Aid. So she didn't want to give us Kool-Aid, right? So I now know that it's medicinal. As we got older, she told us it was, if we had a cold in particular, we would get it, that kind of thing. But there are all these little things you don't have to be a chef to introduce elements of our traditional foods and beverages.
Right. And if you don't know how to make it, then just make sure your children are exposed to it in some way.
And there are things that are very, very simple. There's some good cookbooks out there. Your first turn could be to turn somebody in your family or a neighbor who might make it. Occasionally, we don't do it every week, but we sometimes at WIM Museum will do demonstrations on food.
Oh, really? When is that? Tell us.
Nina Francis did a demonstration for us on beignet and banana fritters. And her reason for combining those two is because she said some people think they're the same thing. Because they have very similar ingredients, they don't know the difference between a beignet and a banana fritter. So she wanted to do it so they were seeing how each of them was being made.
So when is that?
Distinguish.
When did those food events happen?
We always do it during Come Home to St. Croix in July, but we're working on a plan to do it more frequently. We usually teach how to make red grout or guava grout, as some of us grew up calling it. How to make a pot of tea, how to make a bushback.
Great. So this is in July. I never knew that because I would definitely be there. Yeah. What time? When is Come Home to St. Croix? It's my first time hearing it.
It's always the third week of July, the third full week of July. And I'm sorry, but I left my glasses at home, so I'm having trouble seeing my calendar. If I look it up, I could give you the dates. If I can see the calendar on my computer. I believe this year it's going to be, I think it's the 13th through the 19th.
At WIM Museum.
Those are the weeks in July this year.
Okay, so this is at WIM Museum?
I think it's the 13th through the 19th. If not, I think it's the 13th through the 19th. I can confirm that with you.
Great.
So you'll definitely have that. But it's Come Home to St. Croix is a celebration of our history, our culture, and our family connections. And other connections, because sometimes we'll have a high school graduating class that decides to do an activity around that time. So we try to do something on food and beverages. We try to visit some of the places that matter and tell the history of those places. We do workshops on how to begin working on your genealogy. We do workshops on how you can participate in helping us to develop exhibits. So we always have lots of activities, and we try to do at least one family day where there are lots of activities for children or children's tents and so on. So that's available.
Okay, well, that's a
I
great
wanted
thing
to
to
give
know.
you at least 6 activities for these 6 weeks that are coming up. So I know you can't cover the culture in one show, but I wanted people to leave with some things, practical things that they can do during this 6 weeks. And I'm having to use my phone to read my notes, so just give me a second. Hold on.
Mm-hmm. So if you're just tuning in, we have Sonia Jacobs-Dowe, like I mentioned. She's the executive director for the St. Croix Landmarks. And we just learned that they have some events in July from the 13th to the 19th about different dishes. And so that we can learn more. I can learn how to make red grout. I love red grout. I don't know if I'll mess it up if I try it. But yeah, so definitely July 13th to the 19th. Make sure you check that out at the Wynn Museum. Are you ready?
That's also a good time for family reunions, because when we created Come Home to St. Croix, one of the things that we tried to do was to do activities around which a family could build a family reunion. So they might still do their formal dinner or their beach day or whatever, but they could build around Come Home to St. Croix rather than having to plan an entire week or 2 weeks of activity. So we have a number of things going on during that time, and we follow clues from the community, because sometimes a family will call and say, "Okay, we're planning a reunion. What can you do?" And if they call us far enough in advance, then our places that matter might be on an estate that is significant to that family. We might choose to do that so that we're adding to their knowledge of the history of their family, and the rest of the community is also invited. So if you're planning something around that time in July, let us know, and we will do our best to incorporate. We've sometimes done a workshop for the family on their particular lineage. We've sometimes had a workshop where they've done some research, but they've hit some stumbling blocks, and then we show them other ways that they can look for information, and sometimes do some breakthroughs with them in their family history. The other thing that you can do, and I mentioned the Nancy stories and how those stories were brought to the Caribbean by Africans who were enslaved. And then they've been carried on, and there are many. If you just Google Anansi, Anansi, Anansi story, or sometimes we refer to Anansi the Spider-Man. But you'll find stories online. As well as you'll find books that contain them. But the other thing that you can do with stories is to take what may be traditional stories from the States that have come here and personalize them. So I'm not going to tell which one of his friends, but when my son was little, we took the story of the 3 little pigs, and we gave the characters his name and the names of his friends. So 2 or 3-year-olds, he loved that, and he loved doing the huffing and puffing and all of that that comes up in the story. But it also helped that his friends were now in the story. It was him and his friends. So you can take a story that somebody else has written and do that. We also took a story of an experience my mother had recounted from her childhood. And again, it was a way of helping him to know the names of her brothers and sisters who were no longer alive, but because of that story that we told and retold. And, some children like stories read to them from a book where they can look along and see the pictures. But my son used to say, "Can you tell me a story from your mouth?" Which was a story that I was telling from my memory or that I was making up. So that's always a fun thing you can do with your child. It doesn't cost you anything. What it does is give you this time together. And it's through that bonding that children pick up your culture, right? And your norms and your values. So that's something else. You can also make up stories together. where you start a story and then the child adds on and you keep going till you run out. But, keep it light, keep it fun, because that's teaching them. They're already beginning to create a story before they know how to read and write, right? And then the other thing I wanted to mention is old-time games. I'm surprised recently because we had a group of fourth graders that came to the museum, and one of the activities we were going to have for them was the game Wari, W-A-R-I. And there are different spellings and there are different versions of it, but they all come from the African continent. And it's a game that requires counting, it requires strategy, it requires paying attention to what your opponent is doing. And so we always try to include Wari as one of the activities that we have when we're doing a culture and history workshop. And when that school came here, there were a few students who knew how to play. So then they became tradition bearers with the older tradition bearers that were there, teaching the others how to play. And they seemed to really enjoy that. And, there are boards, Wari boards available to be purchased, but you can play Wari at the beach because you can make the holes in the sand and use shells or pebbles to play the game.
Where can you purchase the Wari boards?
Game that you can play with your children, and we usually provide directions for the easiest version. But again, you can go online and find it, and you'll find it under the name Wari or Wari Nankala. I forget there's another name that some students from Denmark told me that's used. They know the game came from Africa, but students in Denmark are learning that game. So we need to make sure our students, whose heritage it is, are learning and playing that game as well. And you can't sit with your parents and play a game like that without having conversation.
It was great. Can you hear me? Hi, Sonia.
It's another...
Yeah. So time is running out. So that's Wari, had the Anansi, and what other? Cause I know you said you had 6. So those are 2. What?
Sorry, I didn't hear your question.
You had 6, and you had those are 2 ways that parents can incorporate our culture. I just don't want the time to run out too much. So we have 4 more. Can you go on to the next ones?
Okay. So also, as I said, old-time games, not just Wari, but jump rope, Chinese jump rope, the ring games with the rhymes that you do. You can also share a favorite memory with your child, and there's an endless list of those. It can be a memory with your own mother or father, with a grandparent, with a sibling, some memory that is fun to you. Again, you're teaching them the names of people, you're teaching them about their experiences. It can be about a teacher, it can be about one of your friends from childhood. You, an aunt, uncle, go on and on. There's lots of things you can do. Take them to places that matter in your family. So maybe where your family lives, where you went to school, which could be different from where they are going to school now, where you went to church, whose house you visited, an auntie, a godparent, an uncle, anything like that. Maybe your family doesn't own the property or never did, but taking them on a walk by that property, noting the property address, that kind of thing gives another opportunity to do things. March is a windy month, but so far, even January has been extremely windy. Make a kite. You can use white glue and paper. You can do that. But we still have manjak trees. And the berries from the manjak tree is what we use for glue. Where the mucilage from the manjak tree is what we used to make. So make a kite with your child. It really doesn't matter if the kite doesn't fly well. The experience of making it. But of course, you're going to try to make it. And maybe you gather more than one child so that then they can fly the kite together. Even if your family doesn't camp overnight at the beach during Easter, visit somebody who does. I had enough of camping when I was in Girl Scouts, so I don't stay overnight. But we always took our child to where our cousins camped. Because they're with a gathering of family, but they're learning about the sea, learning about other things, sometimes even crafts and games that we played there. So that's another chance. And then, if you want to dig deeper into family, we have taught a workshop in a school for children as young as third grade, showing them how we look up someone in the census, and so on. And we have 2 different forms that children can use, and they're colorful. That's one of the reasons. One is a regular form where you write your parents' names, your grandparents, and back to your great-grandparents. But the other one that we started using because it's sometimes easier for children, even if they're using nicknames, there's a form where they can write their aunties and uncles' names and their cousins. And most children know those. Even if they can't go backwards, they know who their aunts and uncles are, or they can find out easily. So you can do that. We already talked about cooking something or making a drink. What's most popular now when people talk about culture are what I call the performance part of our culture. So whether it's quadrille or going to hear a quadrille band or calypso, kaiso, share that experience with your child and maybe look at the lyrics from the song and talk about it and try to find out a little more about how that song came along.
Okay.
So I hope I've helped. I don't know if like I said, I'm having difficulty. I don't have my reading glasses. Don't know if I got to 6, but Nykole, let me know.
No, you're great. I think that those are really good suggestions that parents can incorporate. And I'm getting comments that we should have you back again soon for further discussion, that you are a wealth of knowledge. So they're very happy, there are listeners. And this person is listening in from Maryland. So, we have those that's not here, that are from St. Croix, the Virgin Islands, and, they can incorporate this with their children where they are, wherever they reside right now, especially definitely here in the Virgin Islands, St. Croix, St. Thomas, St. John. So we really appreciate you for sharing that. If you were just tuning in or came into the latter part of the conversation, I'm like, well, who is that? And what are they talking about? We're talking about, heritage and our culture and the importance of us continuing these conversations, not taking it for granted. Other ethnicities, they continue these conversations and they do not forget, let their children forget, and they're brought up. It's not taught in school, it's taught in the home, and it's so important that parents and guardians that we continue to be culture bearer and educate those that are around us, especially the youth. Okay, and we appreciate you, Sonia, for being with us, taking time out of your busy schedule. I know you had a lot going on today, and so we appreciate you, and definitely going to have you come back and be in the studio.
Thank you for having me, and I'd just like to remind your listening audience that Estate WIM is open on Wednesdays and Saturdays from 10 to 3. And we'd love for them to come and have a visit and see how we are telling the story there.
Okay, repeat that. Repeat the time and the date.
From 10 to 3 on Wednesdays and Saturdays. On Fridays, we accept reservations, advanced reservations for groups. So we have a large group, a number of students coming in or whatever, we can arrange that. We just need an advance request for that.
Okay, perfect.
But every week, Wednesday and Saturday, from 10 to 3, the museum is open and the library is open.
Okay, thank you for that. And so as we close out, I got a comment saying it's very important as youngsters grow up to know their lineage when they start meeting and dating others. So we're going to have to have a conversation because that is so important. That is so true. So thanks again, Sonia, for being with us. Thanks for tuning in to the I'm Making It Happen radio show with Exception Yours, Nykole Tyson. Before we close, I definitely want to remind you of Carlos Furniture, the #1 furniture store in the territory. For all of your items, bedroom, bathroom, living room, kitchen, all your decorative items, they have great sales, and they'll meet or beat any price. So make sure to check them out. They have a lot of nice and new items coming in and in the store. Open 7 days a week. That's Carlos Furniture, as well as Quality Auto Parts. Open as well 7 days a week. They have all of your quality auto parts. It's all in their name and located near Sunny Isles. You can definitely check them out in Sunny Isles. Oh, and the Carlos Furniture, of course, is located in Petersburg, St. Croix, and Tutu Park Mall, St. Thomas. All right. So we'll be back again on next week, Wednesday, from 11 a.m. to 12 p.m. I really appreciate everyone's patience for us getting the conversation started today. Definitely never a dull moment, and always having to make it happen. And so again, I want to thank those at WAPA that helped me. I mentioned earlier that I had an issue, and Vern Donadell, who's in meter reading division, as well as Genesis Sanes, who's in customer service, were very, very helpful and pleasant to interact with, and to resolve my issue. All right, so I want to thank WAPA for their great staff. All right, and continue to keep up the great work. We'll connect again on next week, Wednesday, from 11 a.m. to 12 p.m. As I mentioned, if you don't see something happening, create it, be the change, and until next time, keep thinking outside the box, calling outside the lines, and remember, it's about you, me, we. So make it happen.